DA Captain Jackie was escorting a key witness when suddenly they walked into an ambush. Bullets were flying everywhere, raining down like crazy, and she knew she had nowhere left to run. In a desperate move, Jackie pulled out her phone, firing back at the attackers while typing a message as fast as she could. The enemies in the shadows were closing in, and she was out in the open. Every second could be her last. At the very last moment, she hit send and flung her phone hard into the river behind her. The next second, bullets hit her. The precinct got the news fast. Captain Jackie was dead. The sudden assassination shook the Internal Affairs Unit, and an investigation quietly kicked off. The FBI wanted to find out exactly how Jackie's operation got leaked. What surprised them was that this team, which looked tight-knit, was already full of hidden tensions. Compared to the others, Dan and Jetty were way more focused on uncovering the truth behind Jackie being hunted. They swore they'd get to the bottom of Jackie's death, even if it meant standing against their own teammates. After hours of questioning from the FBI, Dan was completely drained. Jetty, on the other hand, was a whole different story. Revenge was like a thorn buried deep in his heart. It turned out Jetty and Jackie were a couple, something the rest of the team had known for a while. Jetty stayed calm, despite the FBI agents constantly questioning and accusing them both. But when the agents hinted that Jackie might be dirty, or even a corrupt cop, Jetty's temper flared. He snapped instantly.
Be very careful, Bill. Fuck you.
He grabbed the guy by the collar and slammed him into the glass. Rage completely took over his mind. The reason Jetty dared go off like that, the one pushing his buttons, was his own little brother.
The fuck is he doing?
He's fighting with his brother.
Afterward, Dan found Jetty in the bathroom, trying to calm him down. They both knew that if the FBI didn't get any leads on Jackie's case, it would just be closed quietly. Determined to clear Jackie's name, they vowed to uncover the truth. The next day, the team got together for a rare, relaxed weekend. While chatting, they brought up a recent FBI raid on a drug stash. But by the time the cops got there, the money was gone and there wasn't a trace of the suspects anywhere.
You run into a big fucking stash house, you let me know, okay?
Meanwhile, away from the laughs and chatter, Dan stared at a text on his phone, deep in thought. After Jackie's death, he had taken over as team leader. While everyone was chatting, a DEA armored vehicle rolled into the precinct parking lot, led by a man named Marty.
Hey.
Captain America! Get the Red Skull yet? ¿Qué está pasando?
He and Jetty traded jokes back and forth. Just then, Dan came out of the room. After a quick greeting, Marty led his team out. Then Dan pulled out a note and told the team they'd received an anonymous tip. In a residential area of Hilaria, there might be some drug money stashed by dealers.
Overtime?
No, this is extra credit. I need Wilbur too.
Before they headed out, Dan made sure Lolo brought along the cash-sniffing dog Wilbur. Not long after, when Mike asked again about the cash, Dan changed the number, just $150,000. When Mike suggested calling the local cops to join in, Dan flat out refused. To Dan, this was just a routine operation. They could wrap it up quick. Soon after, they reached the address on the note. Before anyone went inside, Dan pulled Jetty aside and whispered instructions.
Get him to sign a consent to search for dope instead of money.
Clearly, Dan was holding something back. The second they got out of the car, sharp-nosed Wilbur started acting up, barking non-stop at the house. Lolo, holding the leash, immediately got cautious. He asked Dan again, "How much cash are we talking about this time?" Dan said, $75 grand.
It's impossible. He's being all over the house. There has to be a lot more money inside.
Dan didn't respond. He just turned and knocked on the door. A girl named Desi opened the door, looking confused. Dan pulled out a search consent form and explained the tip. They believed drugs might be hidden in the house. Faced with the cops' firm approach, Desi signed the form, letting them search inside. The moment they stepped inside, Wilbur went off, barking non-stop. Lolo unclipped the leash, and Wilbur immediately bolted upstairs. It kept barking at the ceiling leading to the attic, and Dan turned to ask Desi, what exactly is up there? Desi said she hadn't hidden any drugs in the house.
Dog doesn't alert for drugs, alerts for money.
Hearing that, Desi realized she'd been misled all along. Dan and Jetty quickly climbed into the attic through the ceiling. The attic was unusually clean, and instantly, they knew something was off. While checking carefully, Jetty noticed a section of exposed wiring on the wall. He tugged at it, and the wall suddenly popped open, revealing a narrow hidden compartment. Peering inside, they saw a neat stack of orange plastic barrels hidden behind the wall. Realizing something was off, Dan and Jetty called Desi over for a talk. At first, Desi flat out denied it, insisting she knew nothing. But when Jetty called her out on the spot, she quickly changed her story. She claimed the house was her grandma's, and whatever was inside, it wasn't her problem.
That's pretty slick, Desi.
At that moment, Desi noticed the tattoos on both of Dan's arms. "Are we good guys? We always will be." Desi couldn't help but sneer and retort. Voice, you gotta ask someone else if you're a good guy. Just then, the attic wall was smashed open by a teammate. Dan and Jetty immediately went upstairs and saw an entire wall filled with bright orange barrels. Dan opened one of the barrels and found that this single barrel alone held $1.4 million. For a moment, everyone was stunned by what they saw. The entire wall of barrels hit a total of $20 million. Dan scanned the room and told everyone to head downstairs first. As everyone gathered to discuss what to do with the cash, Dan suddenly spoke up, ordering everyone to hand over their phones. For a second, everyone froze. Sensing something was off, Jetty immediately asked Dan, what exactly did the anonymous note say the amount was?
300. We're in trouble, JD.
Yeah, a lot.
Then the two of them went downstairs together. Dan ordered the team to move all the cash from the barrels to the basement for a full count. Jetty followed closely behind Dan, knowing in his heart they should report the cash honestly. But Dan still rejected his suggestion. Jetty insisted on finishing the count on site first before moving on. He knew that if they did not report it and got caught, they could not only be fired but face much worse.
Jackie told me that she was hip to a big fucking rip that was out there. I think that's what this is.
As Dan was about to warn everyone to stay sharp, Lolo came over trying to grab his phone back. He had planned to say goodnight to the kids, but unsurprisingly, Dan refused on the spot. Jetty still was not comfortable and suggested calling DA's Marty or even bringing in his brother from the FBI for help. But Dan did not want anyone outside knowing about this huge stash. While the two argued, Mike suddenly shouted,
"Hey, there's a black and white coming up the street."
Dan and Jetty immediately told everyone to stay inside and not go out. Then the two stepped outside. Luckily, Jetty recognized the guy in the police car. It looked familiar. He seemed scared of being recognized and quickly drove off. Jetty immediately told Dan that these people were probably members of the Special Task Unit, but they had either been suspended or removed. They should not even be here. The two instantly realized that their operation might already be compromised, so Dan told everyone to gear up, including the cash dog Wilbur. But during the operation, some disagreed with how Dan was handling things. Mike pointed out that having so much cash counted on site instead of reporting it seemed sketchy. So while he was assigned to watch outside, Mike secretly pulled out a backup phone and sent a text message. Meanwhile, inside, everyone realized that Desi had been an informant for the police. Desi explained that to escape her drug addict ex, she had no choice but to rely on the cops. But just then, the phone in the room rang. No matter how much Desi tried to stop him, Jetty picked up the call.
You have 30 minutes to get the fuck out of that house. No one needs to die of 150K.
Jetty realized the amount mentioned in the call did not match reality, and immediately blew up, and Dan started stammering, which only made Jetty more suspicious. He suspected Dan was deliberately confusing things to pocket the cash. Meanwhile, the cash counting in the basement was already halfway done. They complained about the grind while continuing to count the money. Then Dan came out and told everyone he planned to report a small portion and the rest would be split among them. Desi, hearing this, could only stay silent as previously agreed. Meanwhile, Jetty quietly called DA's Marty and told him everything truthfully. On the other end, Marty gave Jetty a warning. Dan had recently suffered the loss of a child and was carrying massive medical bills and a mortgage. With $20 million on the line, no one could be sure what he would do. After the call, Jetty walked over to Mike and asked if he noticed anything unusual. Mike pointed to a streetlight by the road. The flickering pattern was clearly Morse code.
B-I-G-S.
And over here.
Jetty told Mike to alert Dan while he himself headed toward the house ahead to see what was inside. When Mike returned, Desi immediately told him that Dan might be planning to pocket the cash. Just then, Dan walked in and noticed Mike's awkward expression. Dan immediately sensed something was off. To ease the tension, Mike explained the Morse code outside to him. After hearing this, Dan told Mike to come outside with him to check all the streetlights and houses. Not long after they stepped out, the phone inside rang again.
People are gonna start dying in 10 minutes. Get the fuck out.
Elsewhere, someone asked Mike what he just talked about with Desi. Mike didn't tell Dan the details. He just said Desi was scared. Then he told Dan that the house up ahead was where Jetty had gone.
You a snitch, Mike?
You trying to rattle me?
After a glance, Dan did nothing. He just told Mike to go back and help the two girls count the cash.
They're gonna rip the stash.
We need to move. Now!
Dan went to find Jetty himself. Mike, back in the room, saw people loading the cash into a car and was momentarily confused. Dan returned, and Mike asked curiously where Jetty was. He was told they had split up. Before Mike could ask more, the lights went out, and the next second, bullets flew everywhere. The house went pitch black. Lalo got shot in the leg, but luckily the attackers quickly retreated. Dan and Mike decided to chase them. The enemies hadn't gone far. They followed closely, step by step. Voice, gunfire, pursuit. but the accomplices were already waiting in a car by the road and quickly drove off. Suddenly, a man walked out of a nearby house. As soon as he came out, he begged for mercy, admitting he was part of the crime group and explaining that the shooter belonged to another faction. The man immediately called his boss to report what happened that night. Then he handed the phone to Dan. The boss told him he didn't care how much money was in the house. He said to handle it themselves. He didn't want the feds sniffing around over some cash. That cop who got shot messed up our business big time. Back in the room, Dan told the team about the conversation with the crime boss. Mike wanted to stay, but Jetty disagreed. Jetty explained, even if the cartel didn't want the cash, plenty of others were eyeing it. Seeing everyone's different agendas, Jetty decided to lay it all out, revealing his suspicions.
Who's out there, Dave? Huh? Who just hit us right now?
Jetty suspected Dan had leaked their info and even questioned if Dan killed Jesse. In an instant, the argument turned into a fight. They knocked over candles and the room went up in flames. Colleagues pulled them apart, and everyone focused on getting the cash out first. As Mike tried to spread the news in the chaos, he realized his backup phone was gone. As soon as they got the cash out, Marty, summoned by Jetty, arrived, and they had no choice but to load it into the armored car. On the way to the precinct, all four in the car had their own plans in mind. Suddenly, Dan confronted Mike, accusing him of killing Jesse. Dan revealed the inconsistency in the cash amounts. Only Mike knew the cash was $150K, and the call from the stranger inside also mentioned $150K. It turned out Dan had secretly teamed up with Jetty, sharing his plan with him. They had perfect timing. Pretending to argue, they snatched Mike's backup phone in the chaos.
You called in those Hialeah cops.
What?
You've been trying to steal this rip all night.
Meanwhile, on the way back to the precinct, Jetty's brother had already set a trap waiting for them.
It was you who called the house.
And shot it up.
Seeing their plan blown, Mike and Marty started fighting back desperately. As the car neared the trap, the four of them struggled violently in the armored vehicle. Injured, Mike fired, killing the armored car driver, and the vehicle screeched to a halt. Taking advantage of the chaos, Marty jumped into the driver's seat and drove off, with Jetty hot on his tail. Voiced Jetty shooting at Marty's vehicle. Mike grabbed a portion of the cash and ran to the side, with Dan right behind him. But Mike and Marty didn't know the cash in the boxes had already been swapped. In the end, Mike was captured, and Marty crashed his vehicle off a bridge during the escape, dying on the spot. As expected, the huge stash matched the number on the anonymous note perfectly.
Wow. To the dollar. Well done, detectives. Well done.
Desi also received her promised 20% tip-off reward, and it turned out she was the one Jesse had risked everything to protect before she died. After surviving countless life and death trials, Dan and Jetty finally completed their mission. They walked side by side to the beach, staring at the golden waves, enjoying a rare moment of peace and calm. Yet deep down, they knew this was only a brief respite. The fight against drugs would continue, and they would carry on, bearing the responsibility to protect justice.